You know, there are American heroes who don't like this idea. Neil Armstrong, Gene Cernan have both testified against commercial spaceflight in the way that you're developing it, and I wonder what you think of that.
I was very sad to see that, because those guys are, those guys are heroes of mine, so it's really tough. I wish they would come and visit and see the hardware that we're doing here. And I think that would change their mind.
They inspired you to do this, didn't they?
Yes.
And to see them casting stones in your direction.
It's difficult.
Did you expect them to cheer you on?
Certainly hoping they would.
What are you trying to prove to them?
What I'm trying to do is to make a significant difference in spaceflight and help make spaceflight accessible to almost anyone.
One of the most difficult choices I've ever faced in life was in 2008. I think I had maybe $30 million left, or $30 or $40 million left in 2008. And I had two choices. I could put it all into one company, and then the other company would definitely die, or split it between the two companies. But if I split it between the two companies, then both might die. When you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating something, or building something, it's like a child. And so it's like, which one am I going to let one starve to death? I couldn't bring myself to do it, so I split the money between the two. Fortunately, thank goodness, they both came through.
What was your biggest failure, and how did it change you?
Well, there's a ton of failures along the way, that's for sure. As I said, for SpaceX, the first 3 launches failed. And we were just barely able to scrape together enough parts and money to do the 4th launch. If that 4th launch had failed, we would have been dead. So multiple failures along the way. I tried very hard to get the right expertise in for SpaceX. I tried hard to find a great chief engineer for the rocket, but the good chief engineers wouldn't join, and the bad ones, well, there was no point in hiring them. So I ended up being chief engineer of the rocket. So if I could have found somebody better, then we would have maybe had less than 3 failures.
That 3rd failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up.
So many people tried to talk me out of starting a rocket company. It was crazy. One good friend of mine collected a whole series of videos of rockets blowing up and made me watch those. He just didn't want me to lose all my money. We're doing these things that seem unlikely to succeed, and we've been fortunate, and at least thus far they have succeeded. Now is the time to take risk. You don't have kids. As you get older, your obligations increase. And once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.
How did you figure you were going to start a car company and be successful at it?
Well, I didn't really think Tesla would be successful. I thought we would most likely fail. But I thought that we at least could address the false perception that people had that an electric car had to be ugly and slow and boring like a golf cart.
But you say you didn't expect the company to be successful, then why try?
If something's important enough, you should try, even if the probable outcome is failure.
Or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear. I think about what technology solution is necessary in order to achieve the particular goal, and then try to make as much progress in that direction as possible. I think being a multi-planet species and being out there among the stars is important for the long-term survival of humanity. And that's one reason. But then the part that I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure, and it makes people excited about the future. If you consider two futures, one where we are forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system, I think that second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring, and there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living. When my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had one computer, so the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. Whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. When I was young, I didn't really know what I was going to do when I got older. People kept asking me, but then eventually I thought that the idea of inventing things would be really cool. And the reason I thought that was because I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which said that a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's really true. If you go back, say 300 years, the things that we take for granted today you'd be burned at the stake for. Being able to fly, being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that really would be magic, or would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. They weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, if I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. And I also had sort of a slight existential crisis, because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward. I think about what technology solution is necessary in order to achieve the particular goal, and then try to make as much progress in that direction as possible. I think that being a multi-planet species and being out there among the stars is important for the long-term survival of humanity. But then the part that I find personally most motivating is that it creates a sense of adventure, and it makes people excited about the future. If you consider two futures, one where we are forever confined to Earth until eventually something terrible happens, or another future where we are out there on many planets, maybe even going beyond the solar system, I think that second version is incredibly exciting and inspiring, and there need to be reasons to get up in the morning. Life can't just be about solving problems. Otherwise, what's the point? There's got to be things that people find inspiring and make life worth living. When my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. and we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had one computer, so the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company.
A natural human tendency is wishful thinking. So a challenge for entrepreneurs is to say, well, what's the difference between really believing in your ideals and sticking to them versus pursuing some unrealistic dream that doesn't actually have merit? And that is a really difficult thing to tell. Can you tell the difference between those two things?
Right.
You know? So you need to be sort of very rigorous in your self-analysis. I think certainly extremely tenacious, and then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100-hour weeks every week. All those things improve the odds of success.
Or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of fear. People shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway?
If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. Drive overrides fear.
It's about believing in the future and thinking that the future will be better than the past. And I can't think of anything more exciting than going out there and being among.
So what advice do I have for college graduates? Certainly, I'd invite you to apply for a job at SolarCity or Tesla or SpaceX. And if not, then if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then apply to jobs at other companies in that arena, or try starting a company. If you study engineering and you figure out how to design new things, then it's relatively easy to start a company. You just need to get a few like-minded people with you. Although I have to say that the space business is quite hard to start a company in the space business because it's such a capital-intensive business. So it may be better to do something in solar power, or if you're going to do it in cars, do it as kind of a component supplier for cars or something like that.
Musk has college degrees in business and physics, but SpaceX is his first venture in aerospace. How did you get the expertise to be the chief technology officer of a rocket ship company?
I do have a physics background. That's helpful as a foundation. And then I read a lot of books and talked to a lot of smart people.
Don't just follow the trend. You may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach or first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method.
And I want to know, what is the one thing that has surprised you about your life?
Well, I'm surprised about the whole thing, honestly. I certainly didn't expect for any of these things to happen, honestly. Yeah, I just I knew I wanted to be involved in technology, and in fact, the only reason I started a company back in '95, an internet company, was because I couldn't get it. There were only a few internet companies, and I couldn't get a job at any of them. So I tried to get a job at Netscape,
and sent my resume in and tried hanging out in the lobby, but I was too shy to talk to anyone. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll have to start a company because I can't get a job anywhere.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say I'm fearless. In fact, I think I feel fear quite strongly. But if what we're doing is, if what I'm doing is, I think is important enough, then I just override the fear. So, but it's not as though I feel like more strongly than I would like. I think also people tend to overweight risk on a personal level. It's one thing if you've got, a mortgage to pay and kids to support, and that if you were to deviate from your job, that, well, how are you going to feed your family and pay the rent? And okay, that's understandable. But let's say you're young and you're just coming out of college or coming out of high school or whatever. What do you risk? You're not going to starve. I mean, right. It's really certainly not in any kind of modern economy. It's so easy to earn enough money just to live somewhere and eat food. I don't know what are they afraid of? They're mostly afraid of failure, I think. People should be less risk averse when there's not much at risk.
What is education? Like, you're basically downloading data and algorithms into your brain.
And that's sort of a slight existential crisis, because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward.
What drives you? What is it that when you wake up in the morning, do you see a problem and you want to solve it?
The thing that drives me is that I want to be able to think about the future and feel good about that. We're doing what we can to have the future be as good as possible. To be inspired by what is likely to happen, and to look forward to the next day. So that's what really drives me, is trying to figure out how to make sure that things are great and going to be so, and that's the underlying principle behind Tesla and SpaceX. Is that I think it's pretty important that we accelerate the transition to sustainable generation and consumption of energy. It's inevitable, but it matters if it happens sooner or later. And then SpaceX is about helping make life multiplanetary, and doing what we can to continue the dream of Apollo, and ultimately make a contribution to life becoming multiplanetary.
Well, let's talk a little more about that. I think everyone's very interested in that when you say making life multiplanetary.
Yeah, that's exciting.
It is exciting. So what's your vision there?
I think, particularly for Americans, like, you think about America is a nation of explorers. People came here from other parts of the world. They, chose to give up the known in favor of the unknown. So I think exploration, like the United States, is a distillation of the human spirit of exploration, so that's why it appeals to Americans so much. You can see this when, so there was a shuttle tragedy, and 7 people died,
And that's terrible, but a lot of people die all the time. But why do we care so much? Because it was the dream of exploration that was dying along with those people. That's why.
I mean, I thought both Tesla and SpaceX would fail at the beginning.
You thought?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Of course.
But nevertheless, you put all your money in that.
I expected to lose it. Well, technically, what I thought was, well, I'll take half the money from PayPal, and if I lose half of it, that's okay. But then, of course, the companies encounter difficulties, and then have a choice of either let the company die, or put, all the money into the companies. And so, I really didn't want the companies to die, so I put all the money in the companies.
Yeah.
And then I had to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses.
Yes.
It's just looking just for evidence of exceptional ability, and if there's a track record of exceptional achievement, then it's likely that that will continue into the future. Well, it really depends on the stakes. If the stakes are high, if it's really important, then I will overcome the fear and just do it anyway. But essentially, I just drive overrides fear, but I feel the fear. It's kind of annoying. I wish I didn't.
Okay.
I wish I felt it less.
College or which university?
No, it's not. There's no need even to have a college degree.
Oh, wow. Okay.
At all, or even high school. If somebody graduated from a great university, that may be an indication that they will be capable of great things, but it's not necessarily the case. If you look at, say, people like Bill Gates or Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs, these guys didn't graduate from college.
Dropouts, yeah.
But if you had a chance to hire them, of course, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, okay.
So, it's just looking just for evidence of exceptional ability. And if there's a track record of exceptional achievement, then it's likely that that will continue into the future. How I describe myself? Well, I seem to have a high innate drive. And that's been true even since I was a little kid. I really had a very strong drive. Did all sorts of risky things when I was a kid that why did I do those things? They're crazy. I care a lot about the truth of things and trying to understand the truth of things. I think that's important. If you're going to come up with some solution, then the truth is really, really important, I think. I'm trying to think of. It's difficult to obviously come up with things that are praise for oneself, or there's bad and good here, but I think sometimes they're just the things that seem quite clear and obvious to me, and I don't understand why they aren't so obvious to everyone. Sure.
So how would you educate your 5 boys?
Actually, I created a little school. Yeah.
What kind of school? Could you describe to us?
Sure. It's small. It's only got 14 kids now, and it'll have 20 kids in September. It's called Ad Astra, which means to the stars. That's maybe a bit different from most other schools, is that there aren't any grades. There's no not grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 type of thing. Making all the children go in the same grade at the same time, like an assembly line.
I know.
Because some people love English or languages, some people love math, some people love music, and they have different abilities at different times. It makes more sense to cater the education to match their aptitudes and abilities. So I think that's one principle. Another is that it's important to teach problem solving, or teach to the problem, not to the tools. So this would be like, let's say you're trying to teach people about how engines work, or you could start by a more traditional approach would be to say, well, we're going to teach you all about screwdrivers and wrenches, and you're going to have a course on screwdrivers, a course on wrenches, and all these things. And this is a very difficult way to do it. A much better way would be like, here's the engine, now let's take it apart. How are we going to take it apart? Oh, you need a screwdriver. That's what the screwdriver is for. You need a wrench. That's what the wrench is for. And then a very important thing happens, which is that the relevance of the tools becomes apparent.
So all your 5 boys are in that school?
Yes.
Until when? This is from
I don't know.
preschool
So far
to...
it's only 1-year-old. They like it.
They like it?
Yeah.
And you want to keep them away from regular schools?
No, I just didn't see that the regular schools, they weren't doing the things that I thought should be done. Like, those 2 principles, they weren't adhering to those principles. So I thought, well, let's see what we can do. Maybe creating a school will be better. And I actually hired a teacher from the school they were at, who also agreed with me that there was a better way to do it.
Have they surprised you in a way of their innovative thinking?
Yeah, it seems to be going pretty well. I mean, the kids really love going to school. I think that's a good sign. I mean, I hated going to school when I was a kid. It was torture. So the fact that they actually think vacations are too long, like they want to go back to school.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
That's weird.
I know.
Age or people like that, what is it you have in common with them?
Well, I mean, those are pretty different personalities, between Gates and Jobs and Ellison.
Business and success?
I think all 3 of those were technologists, but with different types of skills. Jobs was obviously very good with aesthetics, and he understood technology, of course, and he really understood what people wanted, even when they didn't know themselves. And he was not afraid to break boundaries. But like Gates would probably be better at sort of raw engineering and technology than Jobs, but not as good on aesthetics. But I mean, for all of these guys, they're obviously very driven, and they're very talented, and they're able to attract great people to build a company. But I mean, the ability to attract and motivate great people is critical to the success of a company, because a company is it's a group of people that are assembled to create a product or service. That's the purpose of a company. People sometimes forget this elementary truth, and so if you're able to get great people to join the company and work together towards a common goal, and you sort of have a relentless sense of perfection about that goal, then you will end up with a great product. And if you have a great product, lots of people will buy it, and then the company will be successful.
Yeah.
But really, it's pretty straightforward, really. I mean, yeah, that's the reason for it. I wouldn't say I'm fearless. In fact, I think I feel fear quite strongly. But if what we're doing is what I'm doing is I think is important enough, then I just override the fear. So, but it's not as though I feel like more strongly than I would like.
And in which areas will you never go full risk if you still are fearful?
Well, it really depends on the stakes. If the stakes are high, if it's really important, then I will overcome the fear and just do it anyway. But essentially, I mean, I just drive overrides fear, but I feel the fear. It's kind of annoying. I wish I didn't.
Okay.
I wish I felt it less. So, yeah. All these introspective questions are interesting. I don't get asked these very often. And then, like, I'm trying to think, like, what is like an accurate reply? And some of these, it's hard to evaluate yourself in these things.
Which company you founded was the most risky at the start?
Well, probably SpaceX. I thought it had the lowest chance of success. I mean, I thought both Tesla and SpaceX would fail at the beginning.
You thought?
Yeah, sure.
Really?
Of course.
But nevertheless, you put all your money in that, in both.
I expected to lose it. Well, technically, what I thought was, well, I'll take half the money from PayPal, and if I lose half of it, that's okay. But then, of course, the companies encounter difficulties, and then have a choice of either let the company die, or put, all the money into the companies. And so I really didn't want the companies to die, so I put all the money in companies.
Yeah.
And then I had to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses.
Yes. What was your best idea ever?
My best idea ever?
Yeah.
That's tricky. I suppose coming to North America was my best idea.
Okay.
Because I think these things would not have been accomplished, almost anywhere else. It's really hard to start a company, but and particularly California, Silicon Valley is very conducive to startup companies, and so whenever I'd read books in South Africa, it would seem like the cutting edge of technology was in Silicon Valley, and so that's when I wanted to come and I wanted to move to this mythical place.
Okay.
And are there things you regret having done or for not having done so far?
Well, there's lots of things that, when life is short, and there's lots of things that could be done that one can't necessarily do. And these really are introspective questions. Overall, I think I'm pretty happy with where things are. It's hard not to be, honestly. Yeah. Things are in a good place right now, and I'd like to, looking ahead, I'd like to see humanity go beyond Earth and have people on Mars. That would be really great. And to see widespread adoption of electric vehicles and renewable energy. These are great things. And I think those would be really, really cool.